classic seminal history of African Americans in this country called The Negro in Our History by Carter G. Woodson. And they had to come down to the stacks to find their only copy. I was appalled when I opened the book and saw why it had been sent to the stacks. It had been vandalized. Because in Mississippi, a textbook was a sacred document in the Black community. Because you see, they didn't get them directly for years. Those textbooks that may have been bought 5 to 10 years earlier, you open the front cover and there was a big stamp in there with a purchase date and 2 columns. They were sent to the white school district first. And only after so many years or certain conditions were they then transferred to the colored school district. Well, if you teach social studies or one of those kinds of classes, you know that much of the information was almost obsolete when the book was published in the first place. So how much more obsolete is it now when it gets transferred to the colored district? But that's what the children had to work with.
Ms. Elizabeth, I'd like to ask something. My mother in Battle Creek, she was a preschool teacher for Head Start. And she said when she started teaching, the majority of the children were Caucasian children. And there was a few African American children that would be in her class, maybe 1 to 3. And what she would do is make sure that she had African American dollars in there. Because at that time, there were not a lot of African American baby dolls. So she made sure that the students at that young age got used to playing with both dolls. And I too was a preschool teacher at the YWCA, and I made sure that I also included that same thing, because I remember my mom sharing that with me. But also, you made me think about a song that I would teach the children. Our word is rainbow, and it takes many types of colors to make our world go round. And part of the word is say, you be you, and I be me. That's the way it's supposed to be, but our world is a mixing of. Just look what happens, you know, when you stir it up. And I will always teach the children, because there were children in preschool of all different, you know, backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. So my mother used to say, if they don't get it at home, at least they're getting it here. So I think as we educate our village and our community, because we don't know what goes on and how, so what has been brought down from generations to generations. But it's very important that we continue to educate everyone to move forward.
And I don't know if the people here know about Battle Creek.
Okay,
It was a lot of safe houses along the way
yes.
for the escaped slaves. It's also the burial place of.
It's a journey truth.
Okay. Big statue of her in.
They have it downtown. Yes.
And the creek was the battleground. That's how it got its name.
But that was Indian wars, weren't they? Okay.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
what I find around here is so interesting is we had some safe houses in this area, notably in Owasso. But the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. Because Owasso for years was one of those places that had a sign at the city limits. Colored folks not allowed after dark. But you had safe houses. Interesting. But Battle Creek was known for their playground. So
I did.
did you have your hand up? Were you gonna say something?
Mary's comment about her mother's introducing her to a love of books. I think that is a really critical. Grandmas and grandpas do that kind of stuff too, more by example often, but their books are part of the program. So my point is this: if you grow up in a segregated society, be it black, white, Hispanic, you really only see that world as it happens. However, once you find out about a library and books, then you liberate yourself to see that there are worlds outside of this. I find that in the United States today to be a terrible lack. You can't be a critical thinker unless you can be a reader, you know? And that to me is one of those important but not often stated influences that we get from somebody when we're kids. You know, I got it from my mom big time. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me as far as an influence for the reasons I just mentioned. So I think that's the key to what our moms taught our sons and daughters, what our grandmas did, or our grandpas did. And once again, the family and the village. And that's the only way it's going to work, in my opinion. Reading's good. Thanks. That was a good kick there. I like that.
And you know, I'm looking out the blinds now, and I can remember playing outside at this time of the day. And I could hear my mother in the back of my mind saying, "Girl, you better make sure we in this house before that sun go down. You better be on this stoop. You better not be out there." And that just brings back so many. I lost my mother 40 years ago, but I can remember her saying that. And another thing she would tell me, because when I was growing up, you know, I found this other two-legged image they called them males. And I thought I was liking them. And you know, so when you were a young lady, you dressed one way in the house and around the house. But when you got away, sometimes that clothing would change a little bit. And I remember one time, my clothing changed. It was just a little, wasn't much. At least to me, it was just a little. And I could hear her saying right now, "Girl, if you don't go in that house and get some clothes on, what you think it is, summertime?" But those just, some of those images of those little few words that each one of us have gotten from our mothers or our grandmothers has made us the individuals that we are today. Now, I haven't told you much about my life. My life is like a basketball. It just keeps on bouncing. There's no end. The ball just keeps on bouncing. I was born here in Flint, as was Reverend Mary here. But my grandparents were from the South. I too had to go to the South. I didn't go to the South to play. I had to go to the South to work. You went down there to work in the gardens, work in the fields, and you worked until the sun came up, till the sun went down. And I can remember picking cotton. Most people say, "Girl, how you pick cotton?" "Oh, I had to go down south. That's what you had to do. That's what you did."
Where did you go?
Alabama. And as you know, most of the people here in Michigan, it is a melting pot from the South. They came here because of General Motors. I was born in the St. John era. I was born on Maple Avenue at that time. Most people say that St. John disappeared because of 475. I see St. John as disappearing when Buick City came in. When Buick City was built, St. John was bought up and left. I-475 did not come into play into the latter 1980s. 80s. It was in the 80s because my family moved to Beecher.
I grew up in St. John Street area too, and I remember Michigan Avenue and Willis Pack coming. You remember that? And how
Yes.
the bulls would get loose and chase everybody all over
Yes.
everywhere. But I'm gonna tell you something that might sound a little weird. When that old Buick friends during the day, that was somehow comforting. It let me know when it was noon. It let me know at a certain time at night. And I really kind of miss the old St. John Street area. I really, it was a comforting time for me. I remember the lights, like you made a comment, Mom said you better be in, the street lights come out. Well, in the wintertime, I can remember the glare of the street lights on the streets because we would run and grab on the cars and slide. You know, that was what our big thing was back then. But I don't know that I agree with you at the city. I know my dad at that time got a big settlement from Buick because way back when the black men were placed in the foundry. And I remember it was a class action supplement, and I remember it was in the 70s, and I remember he got something like $9,000, which was a lot of money back then. And he was supposed to get himself a Cadillac. That's what his goal was. Well, he never got the Cadillac, but he did put the money in the bank, and he didn't touch it. And after he passed, and we started looking into his affairs, I forget how much it was, but it had really blossomed. But that was a good time for me. It really was.
I have to agree. St. John was fun time. It was a time when the village did raise a child. If you did something, 2 blocks over, by the time you got home, it was well known, and you had got punished every stop along the way.
It was more than 1 mile.
Oh, yes.
That's right.
That's very true. I remember getting in trouble a many a times, way before I got home, and then trying to figure out how I can tell the story.
Don't lie on stuff.
Try to tell the story a little bit better.
She don't lie.
You know what my big goal was?
Well,
Was to become old enough to go into the hut. And once I became, I remember that too.
Oh
And
my
once
gosh.
I became old enough to go into the hut, there was no hut no more. I can remember, I was kind of naughty, 14 years old, sneaking into the beer vault, and ordering beer. And got served. Actually do you remember the beer vault over in Industrial? You don't remember that. See, I was here for a long time. But somehow, that story got back home. I think my sister's husband, who worked at the Buick, had saw me go in there. And my mother said, "Have you lost your natural mind? What were you doing in there?" I said, "I went in there to get a pony out." She said, "They don't sell pony out in the beer vault." But I was really curious about some of the little neighborhood places. Do you remember Kelly's Pony Island on St. John Street?
yes.
Remember Kelly's? Then there was the St. John Street Community Center, which for the most part, you guys monopolized it. Because I went to Roosevelt. I was at the other end.
No, you was on that other
I
side.
was on the other side.
So you
And I can remember going down there to roller skate on Wednesday. Now, why would I remember that after all these years? And some kind of way being challenged by somebody else, I was very skinny. Long, tall, stock. I hated that song. And very skinny. And I was challenged by this girl. Something she made up I was supposed to have said about her mama. You know how that goes. And she came out with a windmill. And I just got down and hit her in the stomach and knocked her down and grabbed my skates and ran home. And that was the last of me going down to the St. John Community Street Center. But those were pretty much some good times.
Well, the thing that we were allowed to do down the street from the hut, was the Masonic Temple. Remember we could go to the Masonic Temple? Right down the street from the hut. Don't nobody remember the
I remember.
Masonic Temple?
I remember.
But you would go to the Masonic Temple, that's where you would go, you could have meals. I was part of the drill team. That was something that we did as our enjoyment. And it took us to the places where we could not go as an individual. We had to go in a group. And because of the competition, it allowed us to move a little bit more freely than we typically could have done if we just was doing it our own selves.
But that was one of the benefits that the Masons allowed
Yes.
the African American community. Because even, well, nationwide, in Detroit, the drill team that came out of the Prince Hall Mason Lodge. And may I add, the Masons have been a very influential and awesome group within the African American community. Because in Jackson, Mississippi, when blacks pushed for the vote, it was the Masons who coached would-be voters into how to pass the test to be voters. Because Mississippi decided, in order to vote, the black people had to be able to read and write their name and interpret the Constitution. They didn't necessarily mean the United States Constitution. They meant the state of Mississippi Constitution. I found that out on one of those summers down in Mississippi when I was looking for reading material, and among Ebony Magazine, the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, here was a copy of the state of Mississippi Constitution, a book. And so far, it's the only constitution that I have run across that dedicated 5 pages to defining who was who. What was white persons? What was a mulatto? What was a quadroon? An octoroon? And finally, I understood that poem that some of us used to have to learn in school. Little Black Sambo. What was a Sambo? Aha! That's what it was. Okay. But one of the things I'm here tonight is no matter where we were raised, there was a common teaching. You heard your mama tell you to be home before the street lights on. I heard the same thing. And even though I was up the block, it was get to that front porch at least when those lights started coming up. You heard similar. So it's this commonality within the African American community was what I think helped to get us to this point.
And that almost sums up what this whole night was about. Because my mother told me something. It was the same thing that was told to another child. I was not told anything different than any other child was told. Even if that child was of a lighter skin tone, they were told the same thing. But that old saying, the grass is greener on the other side, because we thought it was better over there, when actually it wasn't any better. Our grass was just as green, it's just that we were closer. And it did not look green there because we were looking right at it. If you look off at grass, you see that it's greener than it is if you stand right there and look at it. So we as females, it is our obligation, even though we say it is the male, it is our obligation to inform our youth. Remember, I told you before, the grandmother was the matriarch of the family, not grandfather, the grandmother. The fathers were out working. The mothers were at home with the children. grandmothers were at home with the children. Every now and then, yes, you had a female who had a job outside of the house. But I tell you what, that grandmother was there when that mother was gone. Those are some of the things that we are missing in our society today. We don't have households where there are females in the household raising the children. You may have the 13-year-old that's watching the 9-year-old because people have to work now because of the way and the condition of things are. But we as females, it is our earned desire and our innate capabilities, knowledge, whatever you want to call it, that we provide for the future. If we don't teach it, it's not going to be taught.
I have been dragging my daughter when she was growing up to everything that I thought was cultural. And I became very active at that time with the United Negro College Fund drive in Detroit. You know, sometimes you don't know what's taken in your kid's mind. But when she was about to graduate from high school, she said to me one day, "Mom, I would like to go to a black college." "Are you sure?" "Yeah." "Then go downstairs and tell your grandmother." "What?" "Go downstairs and tell your grandmother." Which she dutifully did. Grandma made a phone call. Because you see, it had not dawned on my daughter at that point that my mother had attended what was then Jackson Day School, which became Jackson College, which is now Jackson State University. So Grandma made a phone call. A couple days later, a recruiter showed up at our house and interviewed my daughter. "What was your SAT score?" "Brought two fellas with him, see, this one is doing such and such a thing, this one is working for Children's Aid Society." You know, wonderful examples of Jackson State University. And we let him know that it would be difficult, since I was a divorced mother, for me to get Courtney in school or through school, but I would try. So he finished interviewing her and found out her ACT score and said, "You'll be hearing from the university within a couple of weeks." Well, it didn't take that long when she got her acceptance letter, and the historic Black College of Jackson State University in Mississippi admitted her and gave her an academic scholarship that paid for her tuition, room, and board. I explained to her, "Darling, that's your job to keep that scholarship. My job is to provide you with everything else that you might need." And so 4 years later, on time, with much prayer, that she would call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, "Mom, pray for me. I got this exam." Matter of fact, one of the evenings, my dorm mates here said, "Pray for me." "Mom, why don't you just pray for the whole freshman class at Jackson State?" "Okay." As soon as I put some cold water on my face and prop up, I will. So she graduated with honors. And she called me last night to tell me, you know, Facebook and all that stuff is great. They're planning a big get-together at this year's homecoming for Jackson State University, which I believe is in October. So those are some of the examples that you showed. Because I, to a degree, resented the fact that I could not go to Jackson State. As I tell folks, my parents moved up south, so I went to Wayne State. I was the sandwich generation. My mother, we didn't even compute what year she would have graduated from Jackson College, day school, whatever they wanted to call it back then. But my daughter did graduate in 1992.